Okay, so I thought this would be easier than trying to share like every single different document and whatnot. Um, my two eye observation components are learning goals and scales, and then identifying critical information. So the two standards that we cover in the Civil War unit. So the lesson that I have is not just one single lesson; it's multiple. But the first one is citing the major ideas of the debate over slavery and states' rights. Explain how they resulted in major political compromises and ultimately led to the Civil War. So those are just some examples. And then the second standard that goes along with it is this one. So outlining the major political and military events of the Civil War, and then evaluate how economics and foreign and domestic politics affected the outcome of the war. So we always use the blue and the gray movie or mini series when we teach the Civil War. So Julie and I kind of tag team this a little bit. But this is what we decided to do for distance learning. My biggest struggle in looking at the learning goal and scale is I don't really know how to get them to a level 4, and I don't really necessarily know if I need to worry about that. Because I do think that they can like outline the main ideas, because that's what I have them do in their digital notebook. But like linking information to things outside of class and then bringing new information into class based on their own research, like things like that, I don't really do a great job with. It's more like this is how we're going to do it versus letting them choose how they're going to learn about it. So I think I definitely have room to grow there. With distance learning, we've been kind of like just trying to get through it as fast as we can because we're behind. But so this is how we did it. We created a digital notebook, and the students all made their own copy of this. So they get, this is my, oh, never mind. I thought it was my key. It's not. So they get their own copy of this, and basically there are days on Google Meet where I walk through the notes with them. I explain some things to them. We look at different graphs and charts and maps in the digital notebook. We do draw some conclusions throughout, so like giving them three different causes charts from Google, and then looking at like how does each chart portray the causes of the Civil War a little bit differently and what led to it. And then eventually in the notebook, they will start with the mini-series. And the main idea is just to get them to make connections between the mini-series and things that really happened during the Civil War. So we do that kind of throughout. So we put the mini-series into Edpuzzle, which is nice. They don't have any questions within the Edpuzzle, but then we can at least see if the kids watched it. And then I give them a breakdown in Schoology, like this is what disc you're on today, and this is how much you should watch, and these are the slides that you should work on in your digital notebook. And they can just like type right in here. And then I review with them every day too on Google Meet. So we'll be like, okay, this is what we saw yesterday. We recap, we go over anything from the notes if they like miss something or have questions. And then throughout, we put these little movie boxes. So we're making connections between real events and the mini-series. So if this one, for example, is about the Battle of Bull Run, and it's right after we saw the Battle of Bull Run in the mini-series, I have them fill in here, like, what are some things that actually happened? And we do it together because a lot of them struggle with coming up with their own, like, thoughts on how they can connect the movie to real events. So we do that together. And then some other cool things in here. Looking at fact or fiction, so which characters are real people and which ones are fictional. So we have that throughout, and then we add in some statistics about each battle too. And the timeline's just kind of a way to keep them on track, like in the event or in the order that the events took place, so they know when they're watching the movie, like this happened, then this happened, and this happened. And then when we add information into our movie boxes, it makes more sense to them because they can make that connection. And then a couple more fact or fiction things, like did that really happen that we saw in the video. We will do a little bit of mapping here too to make some connections between where things took place and how close some of the battles were with one another. So that's kind of the setup we used for distance learning. And I do have them do like some research on their own, like the Who Am I stuff. I try to get them to look up like which person we're referring to here. and then looking up some things about technology related to the war and whatnot. And then the last thing is a little bit of like a wrap-up thing where they're analyzing some of the charts and then explaining how the Union won or reasons that the Union was able to win. And then like which side had which resources. So they do have to do a little compare and contrast there. But I guess my main thing is like I just don't really know how to get them to connect what we're learning about the Civil War to anything outside of class. I struggle with that because it was so long ago too. Like it's not like they can interview people or anything about experiences during the Civil War. So I struggle with like ever getting them to a level 4. I don't even really know if that's feasible. And then in the beginning, I think I skipped over this, is when I teach them about the nullification crisis and Missouri Compromise and stuff like that. That correlates with that first standard that I showed in the beginning. So I feel like this is a great way to do it with distance learning, but it's almost like when the notebook is done, like what's next then? So like how are you going to apply your learning? You like took notes, you watched a mini series, you did all this stuff, but it's like, what's the application piece, I guess I'm struggling with. I don't really know how to get them to more of like a level 4 area. And then this is how I share the learning goal with them. So they do not do well at all when I give them this format. So this is more for me, but I just pull out the main ideas, like the political and military events of the Civil War, and I put them into like student-friendly terminology like this. So I can identify connections between real events during the Civil War and then the miniseries. And I put them on like their weekly slide because that's pretty much what we do all week. Sometimes there's 2 learning goals on here if it's like split between the weeks or whatever, but that's how I deliver like the target for the day because I have found that they don't do very well with this. It's overwhelming to them and confusing, and it's more for teachers, it seems like, than for them to keep track of their own learning. I just do it separately and kind of on the fly with just formative checks. But yeah, my main thought is how do I kind of take what's next after this? How do I kind of take it to that level 4? With some of the kids who are ready for that, with distance learning, a lot of them are not because it's just too overwhelming. And then I also do a recap of each day of the movie that we watch right in Schoology so they know like this is what I should have seen and this is where I'm at. And then I screencast and review the notes for the kids that don't come to the Google Meet so they still have access to those. But I guess what I'm kind of trying to figure out is like how to assess them, and then also how do I take their learning beyond just the classroom, beyond the notebook, and beyond the Blue and the Gray miniseries. I don't really know quite how to get them there. My secondary struggle correlates with my second eye observation goal, which was identifying critical information, because I feel like I identify all the critical information for them, like by picking out what notes we need to look at and stuff like that. And then reviewing all the notes with them. But I don't know how to get them to identify the critical versus non-critical information without it taking too much time. Like I've thought of doing like, well, they could just do a quick write, like this is what I think is the most important part about that part of the movie or about that battle or whatever. But it takes so much time then because they're just kind of coming up with their own thoughts and opinions related to what they think is the most important. And then I have to sift through that and we have to recap because a lot of them are just going to say whatever. So I feel like for time purposes, I'm always identifying the critical information related to the standard for them. And that's what I base these formative assignments off of. But I don't necessarily know if that's a good thing, if I should try to move away from that and try to move towards them identifying it on their own. So I guess looking for some advice there too.